All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to today's class. Uh, so we'll be looking at higher order components. We'll also look at render props, and then we'll do a little bit of introduction to Next.js. Okay. So when we talk about higher order components, they are like functions that take a component and then return a new component with enhanced functionalities. Okay, so think of it like let's say like wrapping a regular car in an armored shell to make it bulletproof. Okay, so that armored shell is like the higher order component that is now going to take in the car, which is the components, and then transform it into a bulletproof car, giving it like enhanced functionalities. Okay. Um, so let's look at something because we are going to be fast with this class. Let's look at let's say let's go to components and then let's create a component and call it with logger dot JSX. Okay. So now let's modify this. Hold on. Okay. Is Udo back? Anybody responding should respond in the text box. Can everyone see my screen? Okay. How about now? All right, okay. So what we've done so far is we created a new component called with logger. So this will be our higher order components. So basically what we want to do is we want to be able to take in a component which we will call, let's call it wrapped component. Okay. And then for this component, we want to utilize a prop. And then within this, hold on. Within this, we want to log. We want to have a console.log first. We want to have a console.log that says rendering component with prop. Okay. So in essence, what I'm saying is whenever this higher order component mounts, this should be the extra functionality that should be added to our components. I want to always have this console, this message logged to the console. Okay. Then I return our components with our prop. Okay. So let's close this out. Okay. All right. Okay, so what we've done now simply is create a higher order component. So what this component is supposed to do now is it's supposed to take in a component, right? And then when it takes in that component, it will render that component here with this prop that has been provided, that you provide. Okay. Now, if we mount only the component that we want to use here, we should not be able to see a console.log. So let's go and let's have a component. Let's wrap a component. Okay. So let's say for overview, so let's remove all this so that we have a clear view of what we're trying to achieve. Okay. So let's say we create this component and we import our component first, right? So remember that, so we haven't imported the wrap component is the argument here. It's just like passing prop to this particular component. So this component is supposed to be like an argument for this with logger. So be patient, you will understand better as we move. So inside overview, what we want to do now is so hold on, let's return some content here. Okay. So for this overview, let's pass a prop of name. Okay. Then for this name prop, okay, let's utilize this. I don't need all this. All right, so we have our header, and then for our header, I want to have overview for this name, right? That we're passing to this particular component as a prop, right? Now, if we go to where we want to render this overview, so let's assume we want to render this overview in our app.js. What I would do now in this will be to create a new component using our HOC, right? So if I come here, let's call it enhanced component. Let's say enhanced comp, and then we say equals to with logger. So we import our with logger, and then we want to utilize our overview component. So we import overview and we pass it to this function, right? So now what we've done here simply is create a new component by passing our overview component to our with logger HOC to create a new component called enhanced component. Now we can render this enhanced component and then pass a name prop to this enhanced component. And when we view on the browser, we should be able to see overview for John Doe. Now, if we also inspect, we should now be able to see our console content. Is anyone confused? Now we can display our overview screen, our overview component, right, on its own without having to and pass our prop, right? Maybe call it John Smith, okay? John Smith. And if we save it, we should still be able to see our overview for John Smith, okay? But we won't have any console, anything logged to the console for this very overview for Jane Smith. As you can see, the log is only appearing for with logger. and with logger. Okay, it's only appearing for with logger, but it's not appearing for the actual overview component. So what has happened here is that this with logger now is like enhancing this overview component. So now this overview component will now be able to function while utilizing the properties that are attached to the HOC component. Remember, we already have our overview here now. So this is the overview component. Give me a second, everyone. Okay, so are we together? Are we following? Okay, all right. So basically, this is like a simple way of creating a higher order component. So there are many scenarios where you might want to use this. You can use this in scenarios where maybe you want to create like you want to handle access control. Give me a second. Okay, are we together? Can we go on? So confirm we are together. Confirm you understand so far. No comments. Can you all hear me? Okay, all right. So basically, can you use it when you are handling scenarios like access control? Mm. Scenarios like access control, and I'm very sorry, guys. I have a work call. That is. So just give me 1 minute, and I'll be with you guys.
Hello guys, please who understands what he's been saying? I don't want to. Network has been knocking me in and out. Please can you just run through before he comes?
Hello? Can you hear me, Udo?
I'm surprised you guys are commanding my call. Why are you guys unmuting and commanding the call? These calls are recorded, so if you're missing something, just hold on. You can watch it later. If it's something I can take again, I'll take again. Are we together? All right. Okay, so for those that did not follow or came in late, because I cannot really, if you came in late, it's not my fault. So you just watch the video again on YouTube. Okay, so let's continue. So basically, that's let's say maybe scenarios where you can use HOC. Let's say maybe you want to handle login. That is, you want to be able to ascertain when something has mounted or is not mounting correctly. You want to log stuff like that. You can create a HOC that handles that whole login process. That way, whenever you have a component that you want to test in that kind of scenario, all you need to do is apply the HOC to that component, and you can easily run your logs and then see where you're having issues, right? You can also use it for access control. Use it to handle access control. So probably maybe you want people to have a particular kind of access before they can view a particular component. You can utilize HOCs for those kind of purpose. Okay. So maybe access, define your criteria for access, and then only when that criteria is met before you can give access to people to seeing that very component that you've wrapped with your HOC, right? You can also use it for injecting props, okay, and then for code reuse between multiple components. All right. So I think we'll just move on to render props. Like I said, for those who were not early in class, just check YouTube and you'll be able to catch up with us. Okay. Um, so let's go ahead and look at render props pattern. So a render prop is a technique for sharing code between components using a function prop. Okay. So imagine giving a child component the blueprint of what to render instead of rendering it yourself, right? So you're like feeding a render blueprint to the child component. So let's see what that looks like so we can move on, okay? So let's create a component and call it mouse tracker. Just X. Let's see. Okay. So for this component, we want to define a state. Okay. And then for this state, we want to call it position. And for each position, we want to have an X and a Y value, right? So for position, we have X and Y. All these positions are numbers, and we have given them a default value of 0. Okay. Now we want to create a const handle mouse move, and then we want to render. Okay. All right. So for this, we want to set position. So whenever this is triggered, we want to set new position. And for X, we want to give it E. So we're tracking the element over here, guys. All right. So we want to say elements and then client X and then the element client Y. Okay. So what we are doing here is we're trying to track our mouse position. Okay. So let's track the render over here. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and look at we can now use the on mouse move to handle our mouse movement, right? Then we can now render the position. Okay. This is a render. We're now rendering the position. So now we can export our mouse tracker. Okay. Now this is just we're just creating a component that tracks our mouse pointer, right? So we're trying to track our mouse position. So if we come to our app.jsx, so I want to be using, for this class, let's use the app.jsx. And then let's say H2. And then we'll say mouse position tracker. Okay. And then for this, we want to bring in our mouse position. Our mouse tracker, and then we want to render X and Y. Okay. All right, so for this, I'm going to, let's see X separately. And then let's see Y separately. Okay. So if we save this, we should be able to see so as you can see, whenever I hover around this component, you can see that it's tracking my mouse position in that component. Are we together? Good. So what we've done now is that we are rendering this, we are giving this mouse tracker a blueprint of what it should render or how it should render. So now it's not going to be rendering based on, it doesn't have its own pattern of rendering over here. As you can see, it's just this render prop that is here. So it's not going to render anything that, okay, let's say if we remove this blueprint that we give into it, it will not render anything. But because we are now creating our own blueprint, so it's like we are giving it a component view that it should render. That is how render props works. So we added this because we wanted people to know other patterns of creating components and manipulating those components so that you can explore deeper on your own spare time. Okay. So with this, we should be able to handle some advanced level component patterns. Okay. So when thinking about using render props, we are thinking about sharing logic. Okay, mouse position, scroll position, hot state, stuff like that, right? You're also considering dynamic rendering based on internal states. So you want to dynamically render something, you can utilize render props. Okay. So hold on. You can utilize render props. Okay. Now let's with this, I think we can now look at NextJS, look at brief introduction to NextJS. Okay. But first, any questions? Any questions? Just raise your hand up. Then you can unmute and speak. No question? Okay. All right, let's go ahead and look at. Okay, yeah. So Udo, you will need to watch that video again on YouTube. Thank you. All right. So let's go ahead and look at NextJS. So I'll be moving to a new IDE so now we can commence. Okay. So firstly, NextJS is a React framework for building production-ready applications with built-in routing, SSR, that is server-side rendering. You can also create your APIs, your API routes, and a lot more, right? With NextJS. So NextJS is like it's a React framework basically. So it's advanced and it's used by a lot of top companies. Okay, so you might find yourself in a place where NextJS is what they are familiar with or their stack. So we would like to give you a basic introduction to NextJS. Definitely, we'll try to make sure that you understand how to use NextJS, and because like I said, it's a React framework, so it's not so different from React. Basically, the only difference is that it handles its routing differently. You can utilize it to do server-side rendering. We'll get there for that in future class, right? And you can also create your APIs. So basically, NextJS can be a full stack a full stack application builder, right? You can use it to create a full stack application per se. Let me put it that way. Okay, so you can handle your front end and your back end using NextJS in the same application, like in the same code base. Do you understand? Are we together? All right. So in order to install, I'm going to drop the command to install NextJS in the chat box. So Udo will do well to drop that for everybody. So you guys should check it out. And I would also drop the documentation link. Okay, so yeah, so I've dropped the documentation too. So like I said, documentation is for your own good. You should be able to go through the documentation to help you understand everything we are doing in class better. Okay. So let's go ahead and create our Next.js application. Okay, so before we go further, I'd like to let me explain some things further. So basically, there are two different types of two different structures for running folder structures for running Next.js applications, right? So we have the pages structure and the app structure. So let me good. So first thing you'll be required to give it a name, to give your application a name. So let's call it uh, next app pages. Okay. So if we click on that, we will now be asked if we want to create our application using. Okay, so let me increase this. I suspect that you guys are not seeing what I'm doing. All right. So the next question will be if you want to utilize TypeScript. So basically we are working with JavaScript in this class, so we would say no. Then you can add ESLint to help you with keeping with the coding standard. Then add Tailwind, and then we don't want to use SRC. And then would you like to use app routing? So good. This is where you decide if you want to use the app folder structure or the pages folder structure. So at this point, if I click on yes, we'll be using the app folder structure, but let's see what the page structure looks like first, okay? Now we are going to be using TurboPack to develop, and for now, let's leave it at default, okay? So now you see that it is creating our Next.js application. Let's give it a minute so that I can create. Okay, so since our folder structure is already here, let me just walk you through what the folder structure looks like. So we already understand the use of package.json, where all our dependencies and our scripts reside, right? Then we package the log where we have all our installed dependencies. and packages. Then our next.config is a next.config file. That is a default file that will come with your application. No, please. Then JS config file is also a default file that comes with the application. For most of these files, if there's need, if you have need to modify any of these files, it will probably be for the purpose of deployment, depending on which platform you'll be deploying to. ESLint is what we agreed to add to our application. This is a linting tool that will help you lint your application and keep to the standards. Okay. Then we have our style folder. As you can see, this is the global style. So whatever style you put into this particular folder would apply to the whole application. Okay. If you want to add new style, you can add other. Say let's assume we have a new component, and you want to add some styles to that component, right? You can create a style sheet for that component here and utilize that style sheet to style your component. Okay. Give me a minute. All right, guys. So let's carry on. So we're talking about global style. So this is like where you can have all your global styling done, and then you can create style sheets for new components as you build. Public folder is where you have your static images and other static resources. Okay. Then we have the pages, right? Now, as you can see, inside the pages, you can see that we have our index.js. This is the entry point to our application where this is like your app.jsx in a typical React application, right? So over here, your div is created, and then you can pass in your components you can build your components and attach and render them inside here, okay? Now let's look at the document. Now this document is just like your HTML. So as you can see, it defines the HTML with your lang, and then you have the head component and your body, the body component and main and next script, okay? All these are provided already by NextJS, as you can see, okay? So these are all tags that have been that are available from NextJS. Are we good? Now let's look at the app.js. So now inside the app.js, this is where this is where rendering takes place, right? So as you can see, component, and you see that the global style is imported here too, right? So now for this API, assuming you want to now create your backend routes, this is where you will be working to create your backend routes inside the API folder. Now, for us to create another page here, all we need to do is create a folder. Let's say we want to have an about page. Inside our about page, all we need to do is create page.js. Okay, now let's create the page component, okay, and then look at it, see it in action. Now, unlike React, where if we want to route to a particular page, we utilize React Router DOM, right? In Next.js, the folder structure is what we utilize to handle routing. So now that we have this folder called this directory called about, and within the directory about, we have a page. All we need to do now to reference this page and route to it is, let's say we come here. So let's go ahead and see what it looks like first in our browser, okay? Now let's just all right, so let's go ahead and see what our application looks like in the browser. Good, so this is the first view of what you see on the browser when you install your application, right? So what we want to do now is we want to route to this page in this application. Now, what we can visualize here is our index.js page, okay? Now, let us utilize one of the available links here. So let's use learn. So let's use this link to access our about page, okay? Now, to access the about page, all I need to do is reference the folder about, and then reference the page, the page component, okay? Now, if I come here and click on learn, it should route us to our about page. So let's name that page about page and save. So we should see our about page, okay? And if we want to go back, let's assume we want to go back, we can add a button. And then we can add a button. And then call it home. Okay. So if we save this now, so let's use an A tag for this. All right, so SRC. What do you mean? and ref. And then we want to route back to the home page. Okay. Now, okay. Is it okay now? Is it better? Okay, all right. So now that we have added, we're routing back to our index page. If we come here and click on learn, it should bring us to about page. And if we click on home, it should take us back to the home page. So that's basic routing for the Next.js application. Are we following? Do we understand so far what we've done? All right, okay. All right, so yeah. So basically, if we create another page, yes, we can just keep seeing, we can just keep routing to those pages as we go. Now, let's assume that, let's change this and call this maybe a user page. User, let's say users, and then, okay. So now what we are now looking at is we want to display, let's assume we want to display users here. If we want, the users will be displayed in this page, right? Now, remember that when you want to view details dynamically for a particular user, let's assume a particular user, you want to now view that user's detail dynamically on another page, on a single page. What we do in that situation is to create another folder here. Then you can call the folder ID. Okay. And then within this ID now, you can now create another page. Or let's not call them page. Let's just user.js. And then for this, let's call it users.js. Do you understand? So now, when routing to this particular user page, that is, let's assume you are using users.js now, right? When routing to see a particular user's detail, you will not be routing to users alone anymore. Hold on. So we'll look at this a little bit more in depth when in our next class. So let's say users, and then now we'll now say users slash ID. Okay. No, not all users. So now all we need to do is we use users slash ID. Just the same way you would have done it inside your React router setup, routing setup, where you have an ID, you want to like nest it, right? Now, we are also using folder structure to handle those kind of dynamic routing. Like I said, we'll look at it in depth in our next class. let's go ahead and see what it looks like. Let's see what the page. So this is the pages. Okay, let's see what the app structure looks like. Okay. So I'm going to need to opt out of this. Come back here. Okay. Then we can create. We can create our application again. Okay. So we use the same command again and just create a new app. All right. So let's call this next app. Let's call it app. Okay. And then we are not using TypeScript. Yes, lint. And then let's tailwind. No node for SRC. And then we want to use the app routing and double. Okay. So as you can see, let's visualize the difference. Okay. So as you can see, you have your public folder and then you have your pages. But in this case now, we have the public folder and we have the app folder. Okay. So this is the basic setup. This app setup is the basic setup. While the pages, the pages Rather, the pages is the basic setup, while the app is the most recent uh, setup for Next.js. Okay. So now let me run you guys through the contents of our app folder, right? So as you can see, we have our page.js here. Now this page.js is just like our index here. It's just like the index file. So you can see that we have our default application setup. So let's go ahead and view that in our browser. So cd next app. And, okay. So if you come to the browser, you should still have the same view. Okay? You still have the same view when you come to the browser. Now let's utilize the same. Let's go ahead and look at our routing setup. So as you can see, app, then we have the page. Now the layout is the setup, is where you have, is like your HTML. And then you have your global CSS, right? Now the public folder is also used for static resource and all other packages available, right? Now, in order for us to have a page and possibly route to that page. So I need to close this. So let's close this so we don't conflict our application. Okay. Let's go ahead and minimize this. All right. So let's have our page and let's create our folder called pages. Now for this folder, if we want to create a page in this folder now, or we can just go ahead and say about the JS. Okay. So now if we want to, let's have this. So if we want to route to this about page now, all we need to do is let's utilize our page and let's use this link. So all we need to do is pages / about. And with this, once we come to our application, so where did we add that to learn? Okay. So when we come to our application and click on learn, so hold on guys. So we're getting a page not found. So pages about. All right. So let's remove this and then see. All right, so I think this is how we should work with this. Okay. Hold on, guys. I'll be right here. Okay. And let's just call this plus. Okay, let's go back to our page. And yes. So yes. All right. So remember that the routing is folder-based routing, okay? Directory-based routing. So as you can see, we have our pages and then we have our about us route. So this folder means this is the route for about us. So when you are accessing that folder, you access it through the pages directory, then pages route, then access the about page. Okay. Now, let's assume that you want to, let's create another page. Let's say blog. Okay. So for this blog page now, hold on, guys. New folder, blog. So for this blog page, we'll create a page, right? The JS. And then we'll do the same thing with regards to when we want to create like dynamic posts, right? We'll also do the same thing, create a folder. Say ID. And then within the ID page, we want to have another page, .js. Okay, are we together? Are we good? So I understand that this, especially the folder structure and routing, might be a little bit sketchy for you right now, but I believe that's because we are not actually having content in our pages yet. So in our next class, we'll build out some pages and then see how they come together. Try to utilize some APIs to get some data so that we can also see what the dynamic view looks like, okay? So I'll need some people to respond. Are we together? I don't see any response. All right, excellent. Okay, so see you guys in our next class. I believe this will wrap up this class now. We'll continue from where we stopped. Like I said, in our next class, we'll look in depth into creating some actual pages, getting some data from some APIs, and then we'll visualize how everything comes together in Next.js. We'll also, in further classes, look at server-side rendering and then other concepts in Next.js. Thank you everyone for joining today's class. Have a good night. Bye.